Has globalization ruined football? My name is Dane Hinchey and I'm a brand and content strategist and a content creator currently working in the English Premier League. From shooting content from the A-League and at World Cups, I'm going to be looking at how globalization has affected football and whether that is positive or negative. And that's not just football here in the UK, but over the world. So football is going through this big change where these local clubs are going global, thanks to how the internet and general culture is just moving. Having worked in football marketing for the last few years and most recently the EPL, I'm seeing that firsthand. Globalization is defined as when a business, organization or football club start operating on an international scale or start to have an international influence. This transition from local to global football clubs, it's been inevitable. But is it good or bad? In this video, we'll have a look on the positive and negative effects of globalization in the following 4 areas. And they are live match days, match coverage, fan culture, and club brands. The first area we're looking at is the atmosphere on a live match day. And I think the atmosphere has been negatively affected by globalization. With these clubs becoming bigger and bigger and more people wanting to go to a live match as a once-off rather than a regular occurrence, the atmosphere, the chants, the flags, the way they move during a match, the choreography does get lost on these international fans. And maybe no fault of the international fans' own by not being exposed to the culture, the fans, the songs, the chants more than they probably need to be. But to sum that up, I do think that the live match day has taken a hit. Other aspect that is negatively affected by globalization is ticket prices and availability of tickets. When people come to games week to week, they're spending their hard-earned money to go to these games, and when people come from overseas, they've likely saved up a lot of money to get to that one game. So they're willing to pay whatever they can to get in. And because there's that demand for tickets or that option to sell them at a higher price, that starts to drive locals out of the market, like it does in many other areas of society, such as housing, to flip that 180 degrees. From what I've seen in the English Premier League, the clubs that are engaged in globalization are making the matchday experience better and better and better. And I think that's because people are coming for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and these clubs are seeing the value in investing in that. So the matchday experiences, because of globalization, are getting better and better in regards to fan activation, fan interaction, the experience being there, transport to and from the game, food around the venue, drinks around the venue, and the matchday experience in general. Moving on to the coverage. Now this is definitely a yes and no answer, and I think there's quite a lot to unpack in this one. I think globalization has had an amazing positive effect on match coverage. Firstly, as someone from Australia who loves watching their Premier League, I can now watch it without delay, live, highlights in seconds, and so on. A recent study showed that 42% of Brazilian fans follow an EPL team as their second team, and around 60 to 70% of fans from India prefer watching the English Premier League over their own league. The world gets to share in more of this rich football culture because of better coverage, and that allows people to watch World Cups, Euros, AFCONs, Women's World Cups, Champions League finals, and so on. Globalization has allowed more people to be involved in these events and talk about these events and make them bigger and better things. Now, the downside of the globalization of the game is that rights holders have absolutely rinsed every dollar they can out of it, forgetting about the fan. In England or even Australia, you need to have 2 to 3 different football subscription suppliers in order to watch the full game. So for example, if you follow a team that's in the Champions League in Australia, you need to be subscribed to Optus Sport to watch the Premier League, and then you need to have a subscription to Stan to watch the Champions League. And it's similar here in the UK with TNT and Sky Sports. As a fan, it's just ridiculous that you need to pay for 2 to 3 different subscription services to watch your team play their season. I think this in itself is definitely a negative of globalization. At the end of the day, the fans are the ones that pay for this, and they're not the ones being catered for. For example, in the UK, you can't even watch games at 3 p.m. on a Saturday. I understand that they want to get people into the grounds to create the atmosphere, but if you live in a place where you can't get to the away game, or you're busy that weekend and you can't go watch your team, you don't get to watch your team at 3 p.m. on a Saturday in England. On top of this, the rules around highlights and the way they put them out and protect the long format highlights, and highlights that are longer than 3 minutes need to come out a day or two later, is just ridiculous. When you have a game where Luton are winning 3-0 and Bournemouth score 4 goals and come back to win 4-3, and you miss that game live because you're doing something else or watching another game, how can you actually get a tangible sense of enjoyment from a 3-minute highlight in a game that has 7 goals and a 3-0 goal deficit comeback? Once that person has watched that average 3-minute highlights of that game, their appetite is gone. If we had to wait longer to watch a better highlight and the appetite was still there ready to consume that amazing game, then there is no doubt that it would be better off. For example, I think this is something that Optus Sport does really, really well in that regard, is when a game finishes, not long after, you have access to a 3-minute, a 9-minute, a 25 and a 45-minute highlight. So if you miss a game or you don't catch up, or if it's a game that's a 4-3 scoreline, you can watch a 45-minute mini match the morning after, which is insane. If you're a busy person and you don't have much time, being able to consume an amazing game like that in 45 minutes is a massive win. To sum up, match coverage, globalization has definitely both benefited that positively and negatively. I would say more positively for the international fan and negatively for the domestic fan. But that said, I think there's more that these suppliers can do to cater towards fans. Now, in terms of fan culture, again, there's good and bad elements to this. I'd say bad because it has likely weakened football loyalties to individual teams. Football, you used to follow your local team, the team you're exposed to most, or maybe a family connection that put you onto that team. Where football used to be, you would know a lot about your squad and your league, but as someone from Australia who could probably name most of Borussia Dortmund's 2012 and 2013 squad, globalization has definitely allowed me to follow more teams across the globe than it has focusing all my effort on my one local team. So whether you take football seriously at a local level for your club, I would argue that international fans, be it bandwagon or casual fans, may dilute the following of your club, and that can be seen as a negative thing. But on the flip side, your club now has more followers, more people interested in your stories, your journeys, who you are and what you do. The good side of that is more people supporting your team will bring more money to your local economy as they travel to watch your team. It will bring more money to your club through merchandise sales and other forms of revenue, so that your club can improve its internal systems, its staff, players, coaches, and so on. Fan culture allows me to follow my countrymen on their journeys. It's amazing being able to watch players like Jackson Irvine and Connor Metcalf get promoted to the Bundesliga, and I can do that thanks to globalization. Another awesome area of globalization is the fashion and kit culture that we're just seeing boom and boom and boom. There's so many stories and histories in kits, and it's really, really cool to see this culture blow up from what was a niche collection that dads used to have in their closet to now everyone who's interested in football has these kits, these grails that they love and they wear, and they're always looking to buy. And I think that's a super, super cool part that globalization has brought to the wider game. I can go to another country wearing a shirt that I love, and I now have a connection with someone. And lastly, the club brand itself. This is more of a tell of, is the club moving towards greed and trying to capitalize on globalization, or are they using it to showcase their authentic self, who they are and what they're about? Brand is really summed up by, if you're trying to be for everyone, then you are for no one. And this example is seen so perfectly with a club like AC Milan. AC Milan is an amazingly historic and prestigious club. They've won 19 Scudettos, 5 Coppa Italias, and 7 Champions Leagues. Their history is incredibly rich. The stadium they play in, alongside Inter Milan, is full of stories, has an amazing atmosphere, and is an integral part of the city. Since Redbird Capital Partners took over this American venture capital company, I would say that AC Milan is selling out in a bid to grow their fan base in the US. And this is definitely a negative part of globalization. While their rivals Inter Milan are winning their 20th Scudetto, they're posting photos of players like Rafael Leao with surfboards and releasing kits about beaches in the US as their new fourth shirt. And I think Milan, in that sense, has absolutely lost its identity as a club. And if you look at the responses to that image on their Instagram alone of Rafael Leao holding a surfboard, they are inherently negative based on the fact that we are losing and we're not winning a title. And that's going to have a negative impact on your domestic fans that live and breathe what Milan should be and who Milan are. Globalisation is being used as this bridge to just access more money across the world, and if it's done incorrectly, you're only going to alienate your domestic fans more than you're going to bring on more international fans. And if you alienate your domestic fan base, your club is probably screwed in the hard times, because when you're not winning and you're not good enough and the people far and wide don't really care about you and you've lost that core group, your club is screwed. To flip that exactly and look at the amazing effect that globalization has had on club branding, there's two clubs to highlight here. The first club is AFC Wrexham. You might roll your eyes, but I really enjoy football and I feel like I know a lot of football, but I had no idea who Wrexham were, both as a town and a football club. And how I learned about that club was when Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney took over Wrexham, created an amazing Disney series that told us the stories of Wrexham, Wales, their fans and their history. I learned so much about that club. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on what they do, what they achieve and how well they go. And that is purely down to globalization done right. Their storytelling is centered around the rich history of the club, where they're trying to take it, and the mission they're on to get there. And that other team is Venezia FC. Now, a special mention here to Athens Calathea, who are likely going on the same trajectory as Venezia, but we'll focus on Venezia for this example. Shout out to Athens Calathea, who also got promoted back to the Greek Super League 1. Venezia was a club that absolutely bucked the trend of selling out and focusing on global growth. And instead, they went inside Venice, which actually worked so much better for them than they could have imagined. Ted Philippakos and his team worked incredibly hard, focusing on getting Venezia closer to the culture that was Venice. And by getting rid of the big chemical company front of shirt sponsor and moving towards parts of the local culture like the museum and libraries, they put the club into the center of Venice and really aligned the state to the club. This harmony was seen by a lot of people worldwide, and a lot of people began to resonate with that message of being closer to the local area, who they were and what they're about. People wanted to buy into that culture. They wanted a part of Venice and Venezia. So much so that allegedly 95% of their shirt orders came from outside of Italy. Now, that club in Venice gave people something to connect to, and that connection that they craved was authenticity, and people look at that and they pick that up. Now, if you compare that to Milan posting photos of players with surfboards versus a whole club getting closer to the city that it belongs to, it's chalk and cheese. So in summary, globalization in terms of football has been both positive and negative. And I think the biggest indicator of whether it is positive or negative is if there's been integrity towards honesty. This argument will likely never end whether globalization has been good or bad for football, but as long as clubs are being honest in the sense of thinking about their fans, thinking about the experience, and telling genuine stories that connect people close to the club and the area that they represent, everything should be okay. Now, if clubs begin to sell out and chase different audiences at the sake of their domestic audience, then that's when things can start getting dicey. By having integrity at the heart of all of the decisions, clubs can create lasting and authentic bridges between themselves, local, global fans, and help them to connect authentically in a way that makes the experience better for everyone, no matter where they're from in the world.